Welcome to episode 12 of Tales of the Ultimate Sportsman. True life fishing and hunting stories sent in by ultimate sportsmen and women from around the world. We hope you guys like these true stories, and if you do, please press on the follow button and leave a comment if you want to. Thanks, and see you next episode. Take care out there, and the best of luck.
Survival of the Fittest by John Hanson. Cottage Grove, Minnesota. I was told this story exactly 21 years ago this past week. I was 12 years old and was on my first trip to Boundary Waters Canoe Area, BWCA, in northern Minnesota. I had gone along with my friend Mike, his family, and his cousin's family. This was to be the last fishing trip before school was to start. It had always been a great adventure for all their families, and I was happy to have been asked along. We got up early one morning and drove the 250 miles north to Ely, Minnesota, the gateway to the Boundary Waters, where Mike's cousin Kenny lived. We spent the rest of that day, plus the next, traveling around to cool spots that Kenny knew of in mining towns like Tower, Soudan, and Embarrass. It was on the third day that we set out on our 18-mile and two-portage trip into the Boundary Waters. It was on this trip that I caught a 12-pound northern pike, shot my first shotgun, and heard a pack of wolves howl at the moon just like on TV. But the reason I'm writing this piece is because of a true but unbelievable story told by Kenny's mom. We were in the middle of our 5-day canoe trip, sitting around a campfire, one evening listening to a bull moose rip apart a tree on the other side of the lake. The apocalyptic sounds must have triggered Kenny's mom's memory banks. She proceeded to tell a story she witnessed in her youth. The story took place in northern Minnesota during the Great Depression. She started telling the story by mentioning that her father was trying desperately to feed and clothe her family during those troubled times. The mines were producing very little iron due to the low demand for steel. Moreover, as most people in northern Minnesota know, if the mining business falters, so does the whole of the Iron Range. She described how her family was sitting around the kitchen table one morning eating the last of the bread when someone, I don't remember who, said, "There's a deer on the porch eating the flowers." Her father then glanced out the window, ran back to the table, and picked up what she described as their very large bread slicing knife and ran out the front door. She then told us how her father leaped what appeared to be 10 feet through the air onto the deer's back. He then proceeded to stab at the deer's neck with the knife, while riding it with his other arm, and both legs wrapped around its body. Her father and the deer ended up in a bloody pile, with her father the eventual victor. He had been bitten and cut by the deer's hooves, but he sustained no permanent injuries. In reflection, Kenny's mom told us that she had eaten a lot more venison later in life as deer had become less scarce in that part of Minnesota. However, she insisted, never had a deer tasted as good as the one her dad had so courageously killed that morning.
Just the Way I Planned It by George R. Naugle, St. Thomas, Pennsylvania. Sometimes everything just goes just right. Every once in a great while, what you plan actually takes place just as you planned it. The evening before, while hunting a trophy buck I had been pursuing for weeks, I was waiting beside a huge blowdown when a flock of turkeys passed me on their way to roost. As they flew into the trees, they were oblivious to my presence. I waited until after dark, then sneaked away, being very careful not to alert them. The next morning, my friend Steve and I were waiting in ambush. I had placed him in the direction I thought the turkeys were most likely to go when they left the roost to resume their feeding. I was several hundred yards to his right. Sure enough, just after daybreak, we were treated to the sounds that quicken every fall turkey hunter's heart. Our quarries were flying down from the roost. Down the hillside they came, but instead of going towards Steve, they were heading in a direction that would take them out of range to my right. I gave a few feeding clucks with my primo's mouth call, and the flock turned directly toward me. When the flock was close enough, I aimed at the largest one and my turkey season was over. At the shot, the remainder of the flock scattered perfectly. We waited about 30 minutes, then I called with my best. "I'm lost. Please come and help me." Turkey talk. In no time at all we heard turkey yelps, then a blue head came into Steve's view. When he squeezed the trigger, we were both happy hunters. Experienced turkey hunters know that it doesn't always happen that way. Usually, the hunter does something wrong and the turkey ends up the winner. Every once in a while, though, everything goes right. Let me tell you about what happened last spring while turkey hunting. I knew that there were a number of gobblers in the area as I had scouted extensively before the season began. I never use my call before the season begins because I don't want to educate the birds I'm after, but I heard other hunters calling. Of course, some of them are poachers, not hunters. I have no respect for them. They are trying to steal from every ethical hunter, including me. When we observe them, we should turn them in. This particular gobbler was a wise old Tom, and I knew he wouldn't be easy. He was, though. I had set up in a patch of larches, had positioned my back against a blowdown, and was waiting for the first light of the morning. A mist was falling. This was the kind of morning I love, as most of the fair weather hunters wouldn't be hunting, and I would have the woods to myself. Not a gobble was heard as the day dawned, and I thought I had made a mistake coming to this spot. Shortly after daybreak, a flock of crows flew into the area and set up a racket designed to wake the dead. My gobbler just couldn't resist telling them who was boss, and he let out a lusty gobble. I got him, I thought to myself. I waited until the crows vacated the premises, then gave several feeding clucks. My philosophy is to call as little as it takes to get the job done. The more you call, the more likely you will make a mistake. Sure enough, in a few minutes, when I looked to my left, a huge black shape with a white head had appeared as if by magic. I waited, motionless, until the head disappeared behind a tree, then raised my shotgun. When the head emerged from behind the tree, the beautiful spring gobbler with 1-inch spurs and an 11-inch beard was history. I believe that if you spend enough time in the woods, good things eventually happen to you. One example of this occurred several seasons ago. I had hunted nearly every day during archery season, and when I hunted one particular area in the evening, I almost always saw a small flock of turkeys going to roost in the same place. It got so that I referred to them as my regulars. Our group hunted most of the first day of fall turkey season with no luck. I had busted a large flock of turkeys early in the morning, but our attempts to call in lost birds met with failure. In camp, over a hot lunch, I told the others of my plan. I would go to the area where I had seen the regulars and they were welcome to come along. They all declined, having better ideas. I went to the spot I had picked out at about 4 o'clock that afternoon. At exactly 4:25 p.m., I saw the first blue head. My regulars were heading for the same spot, and when they were in range, I picked out the largest bird I could see and squeezed the trigger. I guess luck has something to do with it, but I preferred to let the other guys think that it was skill. Most of the time when we turkey hunters set foot into the woods, the turkeys win. What keeps us doing it are the occasional times that everything goes right. May you also have many times when everything does.
The One That Got Away by Randon Hunter, Idaho. I could smell it in the air. The rut was in full swing, dressed in full camo, bow in hand, and my best friend by my side. Life couldn't get better than this. It was the last evening of the 96-foot bow hunting season in Idaho. I could taste the big one, and I knew I would get my trophy elk. As we approached the peak, a thunderous bugle shook the mountainside. I have never heard anything like it. A shrill went up and down my spine. I bugled back and got a shrill bugle, and then another, but it wasn't the one. Finally, he roared again, silencing the satellite bulls. They all knew who was the boss. I let out another bugle and got a response from him. I sat down and raked up and down a tree with a pair of branches. Night was coming soon, so I knew I had to act fast. As I stood up to shorten the distance between us, I heard a rolling thunder roll down the mountain. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was him. I could see my heart beating. I was standing in the wide open, holding extremely still as he searched for his trespasser. As I counted his points, I couldn't believe it. 8x7, sure I've seen it before on videos, but not live. His antlers touched his rump. He was majestic and beautiful. He now is about 100 yards away and closing quickly. I noticed a clearing 30 yards away that he would cross. I set my bow accordingly. My bow has a crosshair sight. Once you choose your yardage and draw, there's no turning back. He looked away for a brief moment, long enough for me to draw my bow. Everything moved in slow motion, but the bull was moving fast. I had to slow him down. I let out a cow call with my diaphragm. Never pull back a bow without one of these jewels in your mouth. Instead of slowing him down, he turned and came charging straight for me through the clearing. I didn't dare let out another beep. By now, I was in cardiac arrest. 30, 20, 15, just 10 yards away. I was getting scared, thinking this massive animal, almost an arm's length, was going to throw me around like a rag doll, my mind racing faster than an Indy car. Finally, he offered me a shot. My bow set for 30 yards. I thought this would never do. I tried to frantically calculate where to place the sight. I thought I'll aim at the level of his knee. And no, that's too low. I'll aim in between. As I released my arrow, I saw a glimpse of my fletchings skim his back. We made eye contact for a brief moment, and then he was gone. My arrow now embedded in the dirt. My heart sank. I was sickened, and my cousin was laughing at this whole ordeal, and all I wanted to do was cry. A trophy elk less than 30 feet from me now gone. It isn't every day you can see such a creature as the elk and become one with them. Bow hunting is the only way you will ever get to know this magnificent creature. I have returned there to settle the score, but he keeps on forfeiting. That truly was the one that got away.
One Mean Whitetail by Marty Thompson, Westminster, Maryland. Many years ago, on the 1st of January in 1972, I was bow hunting with a friend who got himself into trouble with an enraged whitetail. There was about 10 inches of snow on the ground, and from my perch, high in an oak tree, I could see my buddy George standing behind another very large oak tree about 100 yards away waiting for his deer to happen along. At about 9:30 a.m., I caught movement off to my side from about 30 feet up and turned to see a buck wandering along just out of bow range from my perch and heading along a trail that should lead him right by my friend. I watched as the 7-pointer passed within 15 yards of George. With the buck now angling slightly away from him, George put an arrow high in his right front shoulder. The buck immediately bolted away, then abruptly stopped and came back toward George, who was now quite visible against the white background. Directly behind George was a chain-link fence that enclosed a military installation. The buck had been heading toward an area where deer had scraped away enough sod beneath the fence to allow entrance into their bedding area. As I watched, the buck started charging at him with his head down and soon had him pinned against the fence. George held his bow out in front of him in a horizontal position, trying with all he was worth to keep the buck from gorging him and yelling at the top of his lungs for help. I hurried down from my stand and ran to where the action was taking place. I could hear the buck wheezing and grunting as George fought him off. When I got to within 20 feet, I knocked an arrow in my recurve bow and then put another arrow through the buck's heart. He fell to his knees and died only moments later. "Man, what took you so long?" George blurted out. "Hey, you were doing all right," I laughed. "I heard him snorting and grunting when I came up," I told George. "Snorting and grunting. That wasn't him. That was me," he said. LOL. We had a great laugh and George insisted that I take the head and one half the meat. But since he'd been the one in danger and had sustained a lacerated finger, I declined his offer and insisted that he take the head with its 15-inch spread. I agreed to take half the meat. Well, eventually Big George gained so much weight that he wasn't able to hunt anymore, and I don't even know where he is today, but I'm sure he's doing fine.
Take Him by John deWeber, Federal Way, Washington. In the fall of 1970, I took a class from Seattle Pacific University on positive image and the educator. As part of the class, we were asked to make a wish list of anything we wanted to own or accomplish in our lifetime. The instructor encouraged us to be extravagant, dream big, and think beyond our current belief barriers. Boy, did I do that. Hidden in the midst of my long list, I wanted to own a $200,000 home, travel to Europe, go to the Rose Bowl, and go on a moose hunt in Alaska. Making just over $6,000 per year as a new school teacher, I didn't hold much hope of this happening, but I was completing an assignment and dreaming big. On August 21st, 2001, I boarded a plane for Alaska to fulfill the final dream on that list. The flight to Anchorage went smoothly, and we arrived on time. Rob Merchant and Wayne Jones met us, two guys my brother-in-law, Dave, knew from working with Lennox. Introductions were made, luggage was picked up, and we were off in Rob's Dodge Ram. The first stop was to pick up the 6x6 ATV that we were renting at $75 per day. Rob has a six-wheeler and Wayne a 4x4, but we needed one more. It was loaded into the back of the truck, and we headed to do our grocery shopping. One cart, 4 hungry guys, and a store full of goodies. We ended up with way more than we could ever eat. Then it was off to a restaurant for a late-night dinner. As we walked out of the eatery, it was 10 p.m. and still light. We finally hit the sack somewhere around midnight. Wednesday morning, we loaded our gear and headed north. The drive to Rob's cabin consumed a bit over 4 hours, sandwiched around a breakfast stop, and the final 15 miles at a slug's pace on a road resembling a war zone. I think we finally got to the cabin sometime after 2 in the afternoon. Rob and his dad have built a rustic 16 by 24, 2-story cabin in the back country on the banks of Trout-rich Crotto Creek. The only way to the cabin is on ATVs through some mighty deep mud and muck. It was my first introduction to the swamps of Alaska. We unloaded our gear, put up cots, and laid out the sleeping bags. Time to go hunting. Time was a-wastin'. By about 5 p.m., we were ready for our first hunt. This was it, a hunt I had waited 30 years to happen. We loaded supplies onto our ATVs, put a seat on the back of Rob's 6x6 for Dave to sit on, and we were off. Dave resembled a bronco rider as we bounced our way through the woods. Imagine my surprise and reluctance when we came to the first muddy bog and a small rickety bridge made of some dinky logs that spanned a deep, sloppy mud hole. Was I really supposed to drive this $7,000 ATV over that bridge? Being second in line, I watched Rob whiz over it like it was nothing. I eased up, pointed my front tires at the widest log, hit the throttle, and held my breath. To my surprise, I made it over that wobbly mess unscathed. Within 45 minutes, I had gotten the hang of this stuff and was feeling pretty good about myself. We drove for about an hour, and according to my Garmin GPS, we're a bit over 6 crow-flying miles from the cabin. We came to the edge of a small lake, and what a view! There were lily pads floating nearby, with a pair of regal swans working the shallows for dinner. Beyond the lake was the most spectacular view of Mount McKinley you could imagine. We just sat there soaking up the warm rays of the sun in awe of the beauty. If I didn't see a moose on the whole hunt, this scenery was worth the trip. We took some pictures and video footage, hoping to capture just a fraction of this incredible scenery. From nowhere, a canoe with 2 men glided silently across the lake. They got out on the far side and proceeded to undress and skinny dip in this cold mountain lake. Where were the women? Time for some serious hunting. Rob had picked a 3-mile trail to cover, saying several nice bulls had been taken there last year. We slowly poked our way up the trail, straining to catch a glimpse of moose in the shadows of the darkening forest. Several times, one of us stopped for a better look through binoculars. Rob and Dave were in the lead, followed by Wayne on his four-wheeler and me on the rented 6x6. At about 9:05, Rob slid to a halt and backed up. He piled off and grabbed Dave's 30-06 that had been strapped to the front. As if on cue, I hit the ground clutching my .338 and started searching for the moose I knew must be there. The glow of the fast-fading sun cast heavy shadows through the thick foliage, making it extremely hard to see. How can 1,200 to 1,400 pounds of moose be so invisible? I searched through my 10x42 Leica binoculars, and suddenly there he was, a magnificent beast with horns spreading out endlessly on both sides. I waited for Rob to signal that he was a legal animal. To be legal in Alaska, a moose must have either 50-inch antlers or 3 or more brow tines on one side. Bullwinkle got tired of this peekaboo game and merely faded into the shadows. Dang, I was sure he was over 50 inches and we had just let him stroll right out of existence. Rob and Dave sneaked their way up the trail, looking for a final glimpse before he vanished forever. Rob pointed and said he saw him again. As the bull turned his head, Rob counted 3 brow tines on one side, and I'll never forget those words as long as I live. Take him. Dave and I were frantically trying to find an open shot. I looked through my binoculars, then my rifle scope, and back to the Leicas. Dave was struggling as hard as I was to see an opening. The moose turned to leave, and I saw my chance. I quickly centered the crosshairs on his massive neck and squeezed the trigger. He hit the ground instantly. Did we wait 30 minutes before going in to find him? Nah, we didn't wait 30 seconds. To hit the woods. Picking our way through the tall, thick underbrush, we first caught sight of antlers sticking high in the air. You would have thought I had just won the big one, the lotto. Powerball, something. I pumped my fist into the air and yelled, "Yes, yes." Rob was slapping me on the back as Dave and Wayne extended their hands to congratulate me. As I walked back to the rig for my backpack with knives and camera, I thanked the Lord for this incredible animal and felt a rush of emotion as it sunk in what had just happened. I looked up into the stars and breathed a heartfelt thank you. I got my first look at a bull moose up close. Wow, what in the world do you do with 2/3 of a ton of beast? In answer to that, the last camera shutter hadn't clicked shut when Rob had his knife out and was starting the arduous task of cleaning that animal. 2 hours later, a lot of sweat, some blood-covered clothes, and a lot of straining and grunting, we had the bull cleaned, cut in half, and loaded onto the backs of the 2 6-wheelers. Rob expected me to drive that machine, loaded with over 600 pounds of moose carcass, and Dave sitting on the seat behind me, back through all those mud holes and over that rickety old log bridge. Right? Believe it or not, we made it back to camp without anything worse than Rob tipping his rig over twice. The weight of the front half with those 56-inch antlers made him somewhat top-heavy, and he dumped his 6-wheeler 2 times going back. But who cared? We were in pretty high spirits. When we reached the cabin, we cranked up the generator and hung a light over the meat pole to finish our work. As the others skinned and quartered the back half, I caped the front for a shoulder mount. As I worked my way up and over the head and down that endless snout, Rob started quartering the front. It was well after 3 a.m. when we finally finished hanging the last piece and went to the creek to wash up. Rob was covered with blood and looked like he'd been mauled by a grizzly. As we climbed into our sleeping bag, the last thing I heard was someone say, "It just don't get no better." I fell into an exhausted slumber. We had planned an early morning hunt, but after all that work and just 2 hours of sleep, no one had the energy to roll out. We slept until 8, and I got up and fixed some buffalo gravy over Ubangi biscuits. It felt good to relax and rejuvenate our bodies. Rob and I decided to do a little fishing in Crotto Creek, aiming to catch some dinner. Rob caught 4 nice trout, and I got one about 17 inches long. We kept enough for a late night meal. Around 4 p.m., we headed back out for the evening hunt. It was back to the same trail and a trip to the lake. We saw no moose, but as we came back toward my kill site, a beautiful 8-foot grizzly was standing in the road. He had his nose in the air, searching for a free meal. Wayne grabbed his camcorder, and we got some footage of this magnificent animal. The next day, we would see where he tore the ground up while burying his cache. It looked like a bulldozer had gone through the area. Seeing no moose, we went back to the cabin for a dinner of fresh trout and buffalo and barley soup. The next morning, we loaded my moose and drove back into town to get it into a cooler. The weather was much too warm to leave that meat hanging any longer. On the way in, I harvested a spruce hen with my little Savage 22-410 over and under. We also stopped at a car wash to power wash the velvet off the antlers. The trip took most of the day, and we didn't get back to camp until 6 p.m. After changing clothes, it was back down the trail for the evening hunt. Nearing the kill site of 2 nights before, we decided to see what the grizzly had done to the gut pile. As Rob, Wayne, and Dave dismounted, I glanced down the road and saw something big and black. It didn't take this Jose long to check it out with binoculars. Holy moly, it was a bull moose. They grabbed their rifles. I fished out the camcorder, and we were off on the fast track. We walked in single file, so as not to draw too much attention and spook the bull. He was a lot farther away than we had first guessed. When Rob stopped for a look, I'd catch a few feet of footage. By the time we closed in on rifle range, more bulls started showing up. My goodness gracious, how many of those monsters were there? I was alternating between rolling film and looking through my binoculars. I counted 3 brow tines on a big fella and told them to shoot. I didn't even have time to raise the camcorder before 2 shots rang out and the bull crashed into the woods. Another bull strode into the trail, and Rob took a quick look and said, "He's legal." I snapped the camera up just as 2 more shots rang out. The bull staggered and fell. We slipped closer, and a large bull stood in the woods and looked at us. Was he legal? He didn't wait around for us to decide. 2 more steps, and there was another bull on the other side of the road. He wasn't hanging around for this party either. My oh my, but this was happening fast. Not finding the first bull, we spread out and combed the forest. I somehow became disoriented and was not a happy camper. Did I have a compass? You bet. Did I have a GPS? You bet. I never leave home without them. Both of them were in my backpack on the 6-wheeler. Where was the 6-wheeler? How in the world did I know? I had nothing but the camcorder with me and had visions of spending the night out there. Without a gun, I couldn't even fire a signal shot. Slipping through the darkening woods, I saw what looked like antlers. It was way to go, John. I at least found the other bull. I walked to within 15 yards and started to whistle loudly. No answer. Crap. I took several more steps, and those antlers got up and just walked away. He was not the bull we had been looking for. Where were the guys with rifles? After several rounds of high-pitched whistles, Rob finally answered me. I made my way to his voice, and we met up to walk out. Not. What do you think of 2 of us being disoriented? Neither one of us could find a way out. We whistled, yelled, and even shot Rob's .44 Magnum, but no one answered. It was quite some time later that I finally heard a faint yell off in the distance. Turning left, we made our way to that wonderful trail. We had been walking parallel to it for a long ways. We came out far below where we thought we were. It was sure nice to see that trail again. Pointing the ATV lights on a downed moose, we started the cleaning job. It was close to 4 a.m. by the time we cleaned, hauled him out, skinned, quartered, and hung that bull. We were hammered but happy. I cut off several slices of fresh tenderloin, and we had a feast. Oh my goodness, that was good. We even ate the spruce hen. And all of this fine culinary cuisine had to be washed down with a glass of homemade blackberry wine I'd brought just for this occasion. Yep, we had a celebration. and then it was off to bed. We woke to the sound of Rob's dad and brother-in-law's ATVs coming in. We had gotten 4 good hours of sleep. We chuckled at the looks on their faces as they looked at the bull facing them. Rob made sure his dad couldn't miss it as he drove up. His dad broke into belly-shaking laughter when he saw what Rob had done. After recounting the previous evening's story a myriad of times, we decided to go look for the bull we feared was wounded. It must have looked like a convoy, as all 5 ATVs snaked their way through the muck and mire on the way back to the scene. Still half a mile short, we stopped to see what the bear had done to the first kill site. My goodness, it looked as if a rototiller had gone through. That bear had decimated the tundra in a 20-foot diameter circle and piled it over his cache, leaving huge tracks in the freshly tilled soil. We approached the scene with respect and caution, each one carrying a weapon. After recording the landscape on camera and videotape, we drove on to search for the bull. We spread out about 30 yards apart and slowly worked our way through the trees. I anxiously looked for the telltale sign of an antler protruding above the undergrowth. About 20 minutes later, I was startled by a single shot fired from somewhere to my right, followed by a whoop of exultation. Like marching soldiers, we simultaneously made a left face and made our way through the tangle of underbrush toward the shouting. Jim was doing a little square dance in the middle of the woods, without music or caller, and he wasn't missing a step. He had sneaked up on a big bull and shot him behind the ear as he rose from his bed. Hot dog! We didn't see evidence that he'd been hit before, but that all changed when we removed the first entrails, still bloodshot from a recent wound. By the time the job was finished, we had found 2 bullet wounds from the night before. The mission had been accomplished. We had found the wounded bull, and nothing would be lost or destroyed. In the span of 4 days, God had blessed us with 3 bull moose, several trout, and 1 spruce hen. Topped that with seeing a grizzly, and it just doesn't get much better. We skinned and quartered the bull and hauled him back to the cabin. The unseasonably warm weather dictated that we transport the meat to a locker. We packed and loaded our things, drove the ATVs up onto the trailer, and headed for town. Our hunt was cut short by a day, but what more was there to do? We met the butcher in town and hung the meat in his locker for processing. It will be cut and wrapped, frozen, and shipped to Washington. The antlers were to be shipped as well, so I could take them to the taxidermist. Rob rolled my cape into a ball, and it was frozen for the trip home. Dave and I had a safe and happy trip home on Alaska Airlines. As we ate the small, pathetic dinner provided by the airline, we thought of fresh moose tenderloin and thumbed through 5 rolls of pictures we'd taken on one of the best hunts of my life.
Thanks for listening to episode 12 of Tales of the Ultimate Sportsman. I'm John Hedin, your host. These are true-life fishing and hunting stories sent in by ultimate sportsmen and women like you. We hope you guys like these true stories, and if you do, please press on the follow button and leave a comment if you want to. Thanks, and see you next episode. Take care out there, and best of luck.